to tnoozLIVE at Arival. We're here at the Link Hotel and Casino with our live stream presented by Rezdy. I'm really excited about our next guest. We've hung out some, and I was just saying that I wish you would have brought a cocktail.
I know, it is Friday.
It's Friday, and I don't even know what time it is. I just see people
on East
around.
Coast time, so I was like, happy hour? No?
And it's the whole 5 o'clock somewhere thing. And when you're in Vegas, you should.
I just keep saying Vegas, and
Vegas,
everything is an excuse. Yeah.
Everyone's going to think I'm drinking all the time now on this one. Quick intro. Tell them who you are and what you do.
Okay. Yeah. I have been in the travel industry for more than 10 years, mostly on the public relations side. And so I'm a consultant right now. I've worked across the board on destinations, airlines, hotels, you name it. And right now I'm the North America chapter and coordinator for Travel Massive. And I run the New York chapter specifically, and we do a lot of events and networking and things like that. So we're here together as a community partner with Arival, so we're really excited to be here for the first event.
And we interviewed Ian yesterday. We discussed that a little bit.
Exactly.
And when we were chatting last night, I asked you to come on because I want to talk about PR.
Yeah.
It's something that, maybe PR is not the right word. That's a whole other discussion. But, the idea of getting your message out to people that care about that message.
Absolutely.
So, we got a lot of folks who read our website and maybe who are watching who are trying to do PR affordably or maybe don't want to do PR at all.
Yeah.
So, walk me through a few things to think about. Why does PR matter and what are the right ways? Maybe, everyone's a little different. But what are some of the righter ways to do that?
It's a huge thing for a lot of people, especially like startups. They don't even know. They're like Googling, how do I find like maybe a consultant or someone, because a lot of people just can't retain an agency, for example. So it is challenging to say, like, I'm going to have someone for 3 months in my launch phase, for example, or
and due to cost, right?
And like, how do you break it down? What's reasonable? What questions to ask and things like that. And I was just saying also how we're saying how fragmented maybe travel and tours are, but also I would say like PR, marketing, and all these different segments in a way of promotion of your brand is also extremely fragmented. So I would say that if you can find someone that is truly connected in the travel industry in several areas, I think PR is definitely important and critical, especially in your launch phase. Like, you need to try, when you're doing a launch and prepping for that phase, like the press and maybe getting funding as a result and using that as your marketing tool. Like, how many times do you visit a site and it's as seen on or as read in Refinery, New York Times, whatever publication, like that is showing your credibility. And I would say, it's challenging because PR is not guaranteed. So a lot of people have a lot of expectations, and mostly they're a little bit misguided. And I think any publicist that you're talking to, if they're not truly upfront and saying, these are their target publications that I see you in. These are the type of stories that I could see me placing, basically, with my connections. And if they can't kind of articulate that of where, and how many publications, and a lot of time that's just an initial phase of like understanding where you belong, where your story is. Because a lot of people, as a startup and someone who's truly passionate about your job, of course you're like, my stuff is amazing, and you start drinking the Kool-Aid a little too much. And it is great with a publicist because they're that third party, not heavily involved, not in the day-to-day, not in the blood, sweat, and tears. So they truly are like, this is amazing. But also, realistically, there's a lot of other amazing people doing other things out there. They also have publicists. There's a lot of people inundating a lot of these journalists. So what I would say is that, a journalist that truly has relationships with a lot of editorial people, because that, I think, helps open the door. It also helps with more organic conversations with writers at great publications. And a lot of that, I would say that's why I got involved with Travel Massive, is because I would use Travel Massive as a great function of connecting organically with people. And it's such a great tool, in-person meetings. Like, a lot of times you're emailing blindly to journalists, and that's really how you pitch people. You don't call people anymore, God forbid. Like, if you called someone, you'd be like, what are you thinking? Unless like you truly were calling actually like TV or something. If you're calling the news desk, that's a different story. But if you called someone today, they'd be like, are you high? Like, why are you calling me right now? Shoot me an email, tell me what it is. When I can have time for it, I will look at it later, whatnot, and stuff like that. So a lot of that is just understanding, and then also the relationships. And like, nobody's going to email and open it if they don't recognize the name or like the headline, or they really are interested in that and it meets their needs right now. Because I would say a lot of writers are being asked to do so many different things. They're asked to be tweeting, they're posting, and they're this, they're that. So like their time is also completely stretched. So you just have to be mindful and just be a human. Like emotional intelligence, I think, is such a critical thing, is understanding the needs. Like how can you give them the story neatly packaged? Do you have assets readily available? Like can you give high-res images? You have B-roll of your website. Whatever you're launching is critical, I think, in general, because a lot of people are looking to promote it in visuals. And if you don't have that, and that's always a pitfall for a lot of my clients, is they don't have the assets. So you're kind of like, ooh, do you have photos of this and that? And like, can it fit these requirements and stuff? But also visuals sell so much better too. So like tells the journalist exactly what they're going to see as well. So.
And then it also eliminates a lot of back and forth. If it's like, well, now you got to send me this, and then if it's if you don't have this stuff, and 5 days later I'm just moving on because I got stuff to do. And,
absolutely, it's troubling because you just want to eliminate all these like layers and people, time, and everything, like attention span, everything. Right. They're human. Like they have to get things done. Yeah, actually.
Absolutely. Yeah. So all that stuff you just said is great. I feel like we have to make an infographic about that.
Yeah.
Like however many 2-minute statement of just
Sorry, I just rambled.
But you gave literally everything I would have said to anyone. So I'm going to take this later. I promise you. We're going to make a little clip. Okay. Put a little infographic under it. Here's your 5 things that you need to do if you're going to talk to me. It's perfect because it's like you telling them what to do to get to me.
Anything.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So let's talk about story.
Okay.
Finding your story in the company's story, and then maybe multiple angles of that story to specific journalists. So you're not, telling the same story to every audience.
Yeah.
So how do you go about, do you start with, you talk to the company and then you make a story and then think about the audience, or do you start with the publication that you want to get in and then you try to like see if you can mold a story in there?
Yeah. A little bit of both. I would say whenever you have a client, I'm interviewing them and I'm like, okay, tell me how you came to be, what were your trials, tribulations, how do you overcome them, what was interesting, why are you somewhat unique? And ultimately, it kind of also makes them think like, who are your competitors? Also, then we can do a bit of research, like how are they being covered if they're in the news already, what their stories have been, and then what's your story? How are you unique? What service are you providing? Because ultimately, the journalists are trying to appeal to their consumer, their reader. Like they're trying to give them tips that are relevant to them. So if you're targeting a publication and you're saying, for example, I met with someone at the Today Show Digital online, and we're talking about a far-flung destination, and she's like, ultimately, I would love to talk about it, but our readership is more 3-day weekends or things like that. Like there are limitations, and you have to understand their reader and their audience. So if you can understand their demographic and things like that, that will help you stitch together what you're going to talk about. Like how is this service helping their readers is ultimately how the process happens. And then I know when I'm talking to a client, I'm like, okay, I definitely can see them in this publication because I've either worked with them before, I know the stories and things like that. So it's kind of a bit of a process in both ways. But ultimately, how are you serving their audience is how you really can understand how you're beneficial to them.
So relationship first, really, because you need to kind of understand the publication's relationship with their audience and then your relationship with that person you're talking to, right?
It's definitely both, yeah. And that's and journalists appreciate that you understand their readership. I don't know how many times journalists are like, God, if you could just read a couple articles, and that's a lot of pitfalls for a lot of journalists and why there's that friction between the relationship, because a lot of people aren't reading their publication enough or understanding their demographic or reading their media kit or something just to get a quick glance. You can't understand every publication, every beat, but even just like a simple, like the internet's amazing thing. So you can just Google things, see what they've written about recently, and that's just like an easy step to understanding maybe what their next step on coverage would be and how you can fit into that and provide that service and that story to their readers.
And not do generic form letters. And I can't even count how many times I get something about like related to consumer travel or something. It's like, I see you write about travel. Well, here's my lodge. I was like, okay, so what point in my entire career have I written about a lodge in a country? That just never happened.
It already puts you like in that mindset of okay, really? And you already have that, like you're a person, so you already have that perception of this person is like not taking the time, even if you would be interested in that, in the industry side. Yeah, exactly. It already puts your mind off track to not want to cover them, and that's a shame.
And there's also one critical thing that I don't think many people think about is when I get those emails, what I do is I hit spam
Yeah.
And then that tells Google that you're spamming people, and then that can get you in trouble. So you're
Yeah.
actually making it so that if it's your brand's name at the end of it, that could get flagged for spamming people, you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
that's what I do, and I know a lot of journalists do. So you kind of have to, you know, because it is spam. You're spamming me.
Yeah.
It's irrelevant, unsolicited
yeah,
email.
totally.
It's not to me,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know? So, well, we're going to wrap this up, but I want to go into a little bit about how you pick a PR vendor. You know, I've
Okay.
talked to a little bit past couple days, just whenever I can, about what are some of the questions that people should be asking? Like the tough
Yeah.
questions with you as a freelancer that you get that maybe you don't want to get. You're like, oh, this person is serious.
Yeah, this
What are the
person
right
is.
questions that people should be asking?
A lot of people, I would say right off the bat, is you know, where do you see my business? Like, how do you see me in the news? It's just like a very good generic question. Also, I mean, I'm just like a super sleuth online and stuff. Like, I follow people. I go on and look at their Twitter handles, their like who they're engaging with, who's following them, LinkedIn, how many connections they have with journalists and things like that. And then also, a lot of times, it's funny because Travel Massive has been a great tool for me. And when I see that there's people at agencies that aren't even showing up to these things, I'm like, this is an easy thing for you to show up and meet organically with writers. If you're not taking the time outside of your 9 to 5 and you see it strictly as that, then you're not in the right business. Like, so if people can't go outside of their day-to-day or go to a networking cocktail thing or like that, that is where the crucial networking is happening. So I think that's where it's truly important. So if you can kind of like ask them a few questions of who they know, how do they know them, how often are they chatting with publicists and or journalists and things like that, it will kind of give you a good sense of, do they really know their stuff, and like how can they place this, and do they have real relationships they're saying? Because a lot of people, I would say back in the Oprah days, where I'd be like, I just want to be on Oprah, and everyone's like, sure, no problem, I'll get you on Today's Show, and then sign the dotted line, and then later on they're like, you know, we talked to the producers and they really just don't see it. And yeah, you just have to kind of hit those hard questions. You really see it happening. Sometimes it's a long process. A lot of people want instant gratification. Absolutely, everyone does. And so people will be pitching and stuff, and they want automatic results. It's not guaranteed. I mean, I'm talking to you right now, and we might have a great story, but we might not see it for another year. We might not, especially in print. Forget about it. You might not see it for a year and a half, 6 months from now. They're talking about next year, like Travel and Leisure. They're talking about 2018 summer right now. You know, they're looking so far ahead. And if they don't understand that process, it's more of managing expectations, I think, a lot. It's like really where there's that friction is expectations, 100%.
It's useful advice. I like
Yeah.
that. Let's end on expectations. Got to manage those expectations. Thank you so much. It's
you
been
so
great.
much.
Thank you for coming and sitting with me.
Good hanging with you.
So we've got another interview coming up. We'll be back in a few minutes after some messages from our sponsors. This is Nick Vivian from tnoooz. We're at tnoozLIVE.